Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the meeting of the Growth and Regeneration Scrutiny Panel. Can I remind attendees this meeting is live webcast and ask that mobile phones please be put on silent. Before we move on to formal agenda, I would like to ask that we do a round of introductions. I am Councillor Zarina Amin.
Councillor Tim Bamford.
Councillor Donna Bellamy.
Councillor Harry McCarthy.
Councillor Moses Crook.
Can officers please introduce themselves?
David Brooke, Head of Repairs and Maintenance for Homes and Neighbourhoods.
Lisa Ramsden, Head of Housing Management and Partnerships.
Phil Jones, Service Director for Homes and Neighbourhoods.
And we have a member of the public as well.
I'm Andrew Wilson. I live in Huddersfield, so I'm interested in what happens here.
Thank you, everybody. Can I ask the Governance Officer, have there been any apologies for the meeting?
We've received apologies from Chris Friend and Councillor Alison Munro.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Are panel members happy to approve and second the minutes of the meeting? Thank you. Do any members have any declarations of interest? Can I ask you to fill the form in at the end of the session if you do? Admission of the public. We have one member of the public present. Deputations and petitions, Jenny.
None received, Chair.
Public question time. I believe we have some questions from the member of the public.
Yes, we do have Mr. Andrew Wilson in attendance today who submitted questions.
Mr. Wilson, would you like to ask your questions?
Yep, thank you. Morning, everyone. So first question then. Kirklees Council is employing consultants to look at the feasibility of knocking down the Queen Street plot of the Piazza in order to build a car park there. Are the consultants also looking at other options to increase car parking capacity in Huddersfield Town Centre? If they are looking at other options, how are they judging the relative merits of the options? Is it cost effectiveness, for example? Is it how quickly it can be built, etc., etc.? What's the yardstick for judging what would be a good decision about extending car parking? If they're not looking at other options, what are the reasons why not? Do you want both questions, sorry, or that one? And
yes,
yeah,
thank you.
okay. So second question, by any measure, Huddersfield's outdoor Saturday market is one of the most successful parts of the town centre. What does Kirklees Council think are the reasons for this success?
Thank you. We'll send you a response out in writing. Item 7, Kirklees Council's preparation for AWAB's law policy updates. I'd like to invite officers to present the item and the Cabinet member. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'll give an introduction to this item and then pass over to officers for more technical questions. So this report describes Kirklees Home and Neighbourhood's preparedness for the implementation of AWAB's law, which will come into force on the 27th of October. This law is named after young Awab Ishak, who very sadly died in 2020 as a result of a failure to address issues with damp and mould in his home. So it's quite right to both commemorate Awab in this way and absolutely to hold landlords to account and make prompt and effective repairs in response to potentially serious hazards, and to make the response times here statutory. Kirklees Homes and Neighbourhoods have already established good practice and demand response in the area of damp mould and condensation following our notice to improve by the Regulator of Social Housing, and well ahead of implementation of this law. We've addressed the backlog and persistent high number of DMC cases we inherited when our landlord function came back in-house in 2022, and we are now seeing a stable number of cases well below our projected business as usual numbers, and that's been the case since June of this year. Currently we're at about 240 cases. This has been achieved through a comprehensive programme of service redesign, investment in the service, workforce development and partnership with external contractors. We're confident that we can manage demand, including projected seasonal increases, while continuing to remain compliant with the specifications in Awab's law from now and as it becomes statutory from next month and into the future. Our approach to damp mould and condensation is extremely robust. We survey the issues, repair and then resurvey at 3 and at 6 months post-repair or post-treatment to ensure the issue is fully resolved and not recurring. We have capacity to meet projected demand increase through the cold season, which happens every year, and further redundancy built in to address any unexpected increase in cases we might experience. We also have underway a full stock conditions survey of all of our housing stock, which is likely to uncover some unreported cases, and we have built additional capacity in to address these as they come up. Awab's law also has implications in first instance for electrical safety, and we're already compliant with and will continue to with this stipulation, and will continue to plan ahead to be ready for other areas of compliance as they're added to the framework. Our commitment to our tenants goes beyond compliance, and we will continue our journey of improvement to exceed the statutory timeframes and standards, putting the safety and welfare of our tenants as our highest priority. Thanks.
Are officers going to present on this?
So I think all I'd say, obviously Councillor Cook has covered the majority of information in the paper. I'd kind of echo the comments about preparedness and readiness for service delivery. And obviously happy to take any questions from panel.
Thank you. I actually do have a question, and it's regarding those properties that you may struggle to find the damp mould, the reason behind it, whether it's done by the tenant or whether there's other reasons. I mean, how many properties roughly are there, and what's the process to address that area?
Yeah, I'll take that question. So just regarding the Council Cook's already laid out the fact that we do a 3-month post-inspection and a 6-month as well. So that gives a real opportunity to get back in touch with tenants to see, did the initial repair work, you know, the actual treatment, and then any underlying issues. So a 3-month opportunity to do that. We have got cases that do reoccur where we've perhaps not got to the root cause of the issue. That's the reason behind that. And likewise at 6 months. There's lots of communication that goes on with the tenants regarding how they can actually, you know, support the reduction of particularly condensation and things like that. There's lots of literature left, lots of education and things like that. We are looking at a more proactive approach going forward as well, where we can potentially, where we've got recurring cases, put some sensors in there. They're called environmental monitors. And I think the sort of key to that is if we can sort of really establish what's going on with them in them properties, we can help really to identify any sort of issues going forward.
Chair, if you can just add, it's a helpful question to start the discussion on. The reality is that the landlord in the tragic case of our Bishak came from the position that it was tenant-generated issues in terms of condensation and lifestyle issues, and as a result didn't follow up in terms of the repairs that should have been made to that property, and unfortunately there's a tragic ending to that particular case, hence why the government have brought forward Awab's law. So it's really important that Kirklees Council and all other social landlords don't start from the position that it's a lifestyle issue affecting the property. And as Dave said, there is a rigorous regime of inspection to identify what the root cause is of the damp mould condensation, and we address it appropriately, and we carry on and follow up, and we take appropriate action rather than starting from the position that it's a lifestyle issue for tenants.
Thank you. Questions from members? Councillor McCarthy?
Thank you, Chair. I think I should probably start just by mentioning that managing to reduce the backlog and get to a business as usual position is particularly before the August deadline, is very impressive, and we should thank officers for that. One of the things that I was quite impressed with in the report as well is about the comprehensive kind of upskilling of staff as well, and also the fact that engagement with residents has shaped the entire process. I think is something that we should recognise. I've got two questions. The first one would be about, you mentioned in the report that you'll be using external contractors to deal with some of the cases, particularly if there's more than anticipated or to increase demand. Are there any plans to kind of reduce reliance upon external contractors in the future? Because it potentially puts us in a bit of a difficult situation in the future, possibly. And the second question is about other social landlords, so housing associations and so on. I appreciate they're not council tenants, so it's not directly our responsibility, but there's anything that we can do to kind of help our partners in those situations and also help residents that might be experiencing damp, mould and condensation.
Chair, if we can take the second question first, and then I'll pass on to colleagues for the to Dave for the first question. In terms of other social landlords, we, as a council, we do have responsibilities across tenures to ensure that landlords are meeting with a health and housing safety rating system. Clearly, if it's a housing association, they're regulated by the same regulator that we are, so there will be follow there that they're expected to meet exactly the same provisions. And in the private rented sector, we do have enforcement capability in order to ensure that if landlords aren't keeping up with their responsibilities, then we are able to serve notice on them and require them to undertake works. We will have to see what the outcome of our law in the different sectors is, but what we've ensured is that first and foremost we have our own house in order, so to speak, that we've got our own properties up to standard. We are confident that housing associations should have their properties up to standard because they are regulated in exactly the same way that we are, and we will obviously work with any tenants and landlords in the private rented sector should any issues be brought to our attention. Ideally we deal with that through conversations rather than through enforcement, but ultimately if we have to enforce then we will enforce on those particular issues. If I could just pass over to Dave in terms of your first question, which was around reducing the reliance on external contractors. If you can just set out why we use external contractors in the first place, Dave, and what the prospects are for the future.
Yeah, thank you. Just obviously, Councillor Crook laid out the fact that we were coming from a position of a significant backlog. So we introduced the additional contracts to support with that. We have built some internal capacity, a small team that can actually deliver on these sort of predominantly treatments, which is a decorating background. However, when you think about the seasonal peaks, particularly going through winter, we do need to rely on some extra resource that we can be a bit more flexible about. Once we sort of establish what is the new business as usual position that doesn't include any significant backlog, we will probably look at it, increasing that internal capacity. However, that is reliant on other work streams then throughout perhaps the summer months, to maintain that resource. So I think we'll always need some amount of flexibility, be it subcontractors or use of agency staff or something like that. That will probably decrease. And obviously longer term, if we can get to a fabric first resolution where we're not actually getting the amount of cases that are coming through, that's the ideal situation. And obviously we can manage that then with in-house capacity. So it's a longer term strategy, but we will need subcontractors for the short term.
Supplementary. Councillor Bellamy.
Chair, I'll pick that one up. Absolutely. So we'd encourage, in terms of the implementation of our ABS law, a referral in for damp, mould and condensation can be made from anybody. And we'd certainly encourage partners that are operating in the health sector to make that referral. I think it's interesting, you look, there are real overlaps, and there's pieces of work being done around respiratory conditions that GPs are finding with an area-based approach, and that level of support information and ultimately collaboration between health and housing really helps us to kind of help solve the problem, but kind of particularly for individual customers and tenants, get on top of their particular issue. So if GPs, health professionals, anyone from that environment wants to make that referral, we'd absolutely welcome that.
Supplementary. Are there any other questions? Councillor Bell.
Thank you for getting the backlog down, because as you all know, David, we had a really severe case in Denbydale. It took 4 years to get any real progress with it, but now they've had the roof replacement programme, they've had the roof done, and it's all caught up. She actually sent me a really nice email the other day just to say that, thanks very much. Just one little question. The lifestyle issue, if we're going to ventilate the homes, and given that it's winter, there's a bit of a balance there between heating the home and ventilating it. When you ventilate it, obviously it's going to be cooler. Is it, I don't know what I'm asking, but I'm just saying, you want to keep the house warm, you keep the windows closed, won't you? But you have to ventilate it to stop condensation.
Thanks, Tim. I think this is a really important question, and I think it speaks to what David was talking about before around landlords perhaps apportioning blame to tenants and lifestyle in terms of damp, mould and condensation. There is an issue with the capacity of a house to deal with the inhabitants. That's partly because we've changed the way that we live in our houses now, and it's partly because the social housing sector in particular has an overcrowding issue. If there are tenants in a house and the house is not fit for the occupancy, that is a landlord problem, not a tenant problem. And so when you've got condensation build-up, that could be because there needs to be a fabric upgrade on the house, so insulation standards could not be sufficient, or there could be an archetypal problem with the structure of the house leading to cold bridging, and you will get condensation forming on the cold bridges. In both cases, that's for the landlord to resolve, not for the tenant to be blamed for. There's also issues around the efficacy of the heating system and the efficacy of the ventilation system. As you rightly pointed out, one way to deal with condensation is to open windows. Clearly in the winter you get cold if you have your windows open, and there's an affordability aspect to that as well. We can't expect our tenants to have the heating on full and all the windows open just to deal with a condensation issue, which could be resolved by a fabric upgrade of the house. And I think this goes back to the question that Dave answered around capacity within the DLO, within the internal works team. If we use that capacity and expertise to do things like roof repairs, you referenced a DMC case, or to fabric upgrades in our buildings, that's a more effective way to improve stock and improve safety and conditions for our tenants over time than to retrain that same resource to deal with the acute presentations of damp, mould and condensation where that expertise already exists in the private sector. So take Harry's point that we wanted, in an ideal world, we would do all of the work in-house, but actually, when we're getting from a situation that we inherited that is not where we want to be, to get back to a business as usual, it is more effective to use that external resource to deal with the acute presentation while we're using our expertise in-house to improve the quality of our housing, because that is our number one, and has stayed our number one priority, to make sure that the safety and comfort of our tenants is paramount.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, officers, for presenting the item. I'll move on to agenda item 8, update of the Housing Management and Partnership Service redesign. Would officers and Cabinet Member like to present the item? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So item 8, this is a report and update on the ongoing redesign of the Kirklees Homes and Neighbourhoods Housing Management and Partnerships Service. I don't like the acronym for Housing Management and Partnerships. HMP sounds a little wrong. Including progress, key changes and improvement in tenant experience as a result. This is the service responsible for the delivery of landlord functions to our tenants. Over recent years, there's been a narrowing of the range of service provision from our housing service, as well as a move towards recovery of costs to comply with regulations from the Regulator of Social Housing. with respect to what can be provided as a landlord. This has clearly been a process which has required very clear communication with tenants, as well as a sensitive and supportive transition. Through this and all service areas, my view is that we need to define a trusting relationship with our tenants, one where we can be very clear at every level of the service on what we can and what we cannot provide as a landlord. We need to say clearly what we can help with or provide, and how and when we will do this, and we then need to deliver and do what we say we will do. The regulator of social housing has provided us with the 4 consumer standards, and we have to ensure compliance against these. There are 22 tenant satisfaction measures that we will measure our performance against, including 12 tenant perception measures, which help us to identify when we are not providing the service to tenants that they should expect. These measures have shown a decrease in satisfaction in the year 24-25 compared to the previous reporting period in 23-24. The service redesign here is a response to this unacceptable trend, and you will see from the appendix in your papers that our mid-year analysis shows an increase in every one of the 12 TSMs, the tenant perception parts of that 22, against the most recent year, and an increase in performance against 11 out of the 12 against the year before, the 23-24 year. We're not yet performing as well as we would like, but the work done to date has reversed the trend that we had seen, and we are starting to see signs of recovery and an increase in confidence and satisfaction from our tenants. I'll just pass over to officers now.
Thanks for that, Councillor Crooks. I think I'd like to bring to the attention of committee 3 things. I think the report to me talks to increase and improved visibility within our neighbourhoods, which we know is really, really important to our tenants. I think secondary to that, the work that we are starting to look at and introducing the report around antisocial behaviour, we know it's a key factor that affects our tenants, and something that we've acknowledged that we need to get to grips with, and the introduction of the team really kind of addresses that, but also provides an immediate response into that space. And the third thing, positive thing that I want to bring to the attention of the committee is the approach around neighbourhood plans and neighbourhood planning. I think it gives a real sense to communities of what we intend to do, and creates the opportunity for accountability as well within those communities to agree action with us, but also to challenges when we're perhaps not doing the things that we've committed to do, or things that communities want. So those are my 3 points in addition to Councillor Crook's introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. It's really positive that the council's had a revamp and is looking at antisocial behaviour. My question stems around, if that antisocial behaviour is coming from a council tenant, and obviously they're causing their neighbours a lot of problems, how would you deal with that? And if they were eventually moved, it just feels like that problem will just move elsewhere? So what's kind of the process, if someone could talk that through? Thank you.
I think in terms of the when we receive reports of antisocial behaviour, what is really important is that we assess vulnerabilities of both the accused party as well as the victim that's made the complaint. We work in a way that we try to tackle antisocial behaviour quickly using a whole range of methods such as mediation, speaking to the neighbours, try to get them to reach an agreement. If that doesn't work, we look at warnings in terms of action against the tenancy, and then if the behaviour continues, then at that point we actually work with our colleagues in Safer Kirklees. They deal with the higher level of antisocial behaviour investigations, and if needed they would then go through different ASP tools and powers in terms of our legal action. So it would depend often. We want to keep people in the homes, but there's got to be that balance of the disturbance and distress that they're causing to the neighbours and the community as a whole. So the the tools and powers we have, it may be an injunction to stop somebody playing music at a certain time of day at such a level, but in the most serious cases it would lead to tools such as possession, repossession of the property, leading to eviction, or in real extreme cases we can apply for a closure order where we have the powers to close a property down within 48 hours for a period of 3 months. And so in those circumstances, what is really important is that we work with all involved, certainly the tenant who is at risk of potential homelessness at that point. And what we do is we work with housing solutions just in terms of what can be offered to that person. Often we find that they will go and stay with friends or family, but that isn't always the case. So we will assess vulnerability, and each case is on its own merit, if you like, when we're making those assessments based on the needs of that individual.
Thank you. Just a question that links in, I suppose. If we have an example of a council tenant, but they're being disturbed by somebody, and this often does come up where it's the homeowner, how much powers do the council actually have to intervene in those circumstances?
It does come up quite often, and it is a challenge for us, because generally we won't have any powers because there's no tenancy agreement in place because they're an owner-occupier. However, what we will do, we would still go through the early stage antisocial behaviour process in terms of trying to get them to speak to each other, mediation, offer support where needed. But when it actually comes to the tools and powers, we do have very limited powers in terms of action that we can take against a homeowner.
Thank you. Questions from members? Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, and thanks to officers for the report as well. So I've got a few questions. The first one would be regarding the tenant satisfaction measures. This says that there's 12 that are measured from a perception survey. Is there any? Do we have any indication of what the kind of the direction of travel is with the other 10 that are obtained from management information, or that's not really particularly relevant to this? I also there's a bit in the report as well, if I can just find it on 3.2, which is talking about the absence of an effective IT reporting system. I'm just wondering, do housing officers have like a case management tool? Because it appears from the report on damp, mould and condensation, there is one, but it's here talking about the absence of an effective IT reporting system, and people are kind of expected to manage that kind of caseload on their own. And then the final question that I would have would be about the neighbourhood plans. What is the kind of geography? Is that kind of across the district, or is that kind of specific estates, or is it a different area? Thank you.
So, Chair, I'll take question 1 and 2, and then I'll pass over to Lise to answer the third question, if that's okay. So in terms of TSMs, you're absolutely right. So the 12 that are in the paper are the key 12 perception outcomes. The other outcomes that we report on are things around like property performance, things like that. So we do monitor that in year, and we can provide that information to council if required. Generally speaking, the trends are positive. There are a couple where we are kind of in that kind of transitional phase, so I'm happy to provide that information if that's useful for you. In terms of the point about 3.2, the absence of an IT reporting system, so we're currently in the transition from an obsolete housing management system into CX. When we achieve that transition, which is expected in the next couple of weeks, our IT and data systems will be much more robust around housing management, and that will include the work that we're doing around antisocial behaviour. So hopefully that issue will be resolved as a result of that transition. And if it's okay, I'll hand over to Lisa to talk about the neighbourhood plans.
Thank you. Just to answer your question in terms of the geography around the neighbourhood plans, because we're collating an awful lot of data from a range of sources that are outlined in the report, we will initially be looking at ward-based data, but obviously some of the estates we manage don't always align. We can have, as you'll be aware, one street on either side could be a different ward area, so we're looking closely at those, and in addition to that, what is really important in terms of the neighbourhood plans is that we are considering, even if the ward areas are different, we're considering the community as a whole. And that's really important because, as we're aware, there are some communities that have some really challenging and complex needs. And what's really important for us is that we are ensuring that we've got the right levels of resource within those communities to deal with some of the challenges that certainly we and the communities can face. Answer your question.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just would make a comment is that thinking about my ward, for example, there's not a huge amount of social housing, but it's spread over a very large area. And, you know, each of those council estates, you know, they are kind of still very integrated in their own communities in their own way. And I think, you know, recognising kind of the difference of how much these areas is going to be really important as part of that. Yeah, and I would just also mention it's good that we are transitioning as well to a proper system, housing management system. That's good to hear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do any members have any additional questions? Right, I'd like to thank Councillor Crook, Cabinet Member, and officers for your presentation. Thank you. I think this is the end of the session. Thank you, everybody.